Hi, welcome to the Andrew Buckle book review of The Tankies. That's by there. You can see all the various ways. Garth Ennis and Carlos Ezquerra, superb artists. I love his artwork, absolutely brilliant. Now it's obviously paperback, soft paperback there, 250 pages, just come out, 2021, and from Dead Reckoning. And it's great that they sent me a copy, so I'm really pleased with that. However, what can I say? It's brilliant. That's it. That's all I can say. I wouldn't, if I thought it was rubbish, I would say it's rubbish. I just loved it. I just thought it was an absolute. But I'm coming from a complete background of complete ignorance of war comics, basically. I mean, I've read Sergeant Fury, sort of Sergeant Rock, and also, of course, UK comic books, Warlord, etc., Battle over the years. I wouldn't say, though, I'm particularly knowledgeable about war comics, Commando, and those sort of magazines as well. You've got Battle. I've got a few war books, but not many. Not many Warlord annuals and those sort of things. And also I've got this. I treated myself to this. So that shows you how much I enjoyed this. I went out and bought this, Battle in Britons. It's sort of about classic British war comics. Very, very good as well. I will be doing a review of that, but thoroughly. However, back to the book. Now this is brutal. And some of the stories I think have been elsewhere as well. So it's... would point that out as well. But this, I really hope there's a Tankies Volume 2 and Volume 3, because I definitely enjoyed this. Not in a particularly because of, I'm really not into war conflicts, etc. But it still was a fascinating understanding about the tanks and what they did during the war. It was just absolutely, I thought it captured it really well. And it's there's all the various details there. And obviously, there. And it's got three stories, three separate Tankies, Firefly in His Majesty, and the Greenfields Beyond. So you've got two in the Second World War and one in the Korean War. Now, this book has also got a great bit. I love this. It's got all about, obviously, like detail. It's got some information, some background. There's nothing better than a bit of background, I think, to everything, as well as a story. Now, it's brutal. This is brutal. This is no sugarcoating of the thing. You've got, and I don't know how people would even want to be in a tank, frankly. And I look at it, and just the idea of just going in that hole at the top, just really, I think, ooh. And you've got some truly horrible scenes in here and it must have been the smell, must have been on a hot day. I dread that it must have been, and also in the winter, it must have been so cold. Anyway, and I think this book really captures that sort of thing when you've got pull people through, and it's just like, there's some bits I just can't show in this book. But anyway, you've got someone pulling, obviously you've got a lot of firefight there, and you know what's going to happen. The guy, they're trying to pull this person in because he's not answering. I know that's a bit of a spoiler, my apologies, but that's about 2 pages in, and that's really the tone all the way through. It is horrible. Must have been, it just doesn't bear thinking about people who would have had that situation, all the people. And even though you see these people sometimes for only a few panels, absolutely captures them really well. And you can understand the characters and the text, and it's just fascinating. And the flow of the panels, just a great, great read. But it is brutal. And Sgt Stiles, great character. Even though I must admit, I did struggle at times what actually he was saying. Because it actually says it, and you're thinking, you have to reread it a few times thinking, okay, that's what was said. But it's just plain brutal. I mean, this is when you see a film, sometimes you watch films and things, and it's not really that, but I think comic books capture it in far more intensity than a film sometimes. Everything's different. Films, paintings, books, when you read a novel about it, you get certain aspects of the time, you understand it in different ways. With a comic book, it has its own thing. That's why I would never, it always annoys me when people say, comic book, dismissive. And yet comic books capture stuff in a way that you just cannot. You've got the timing, the panels, the speed, how you can look at it, and you just look at that and think, yes. Whereas in a film, sometimes you watch a film or something, it's just over, and you pass on, you move on, because film doesn't slow down for you. Comic books, you can do that. You can just process it at your pace. You can look at it and go, obviously the artist controls things, but at the same time you can just go, something like in a novel, when you read a novel, you get a description, blah, 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 blah. and you go, yeah, that's good, and you move on. But I think comic book, you look at it and go, just pure, and this all the way through just must have been awful. Oh, can't show that. There's just some scenes I just cannot show. There's just scenes of violence and things that are just horrible. I mean, showing nothing. And that's the problem. I'm going to have to put this as a 18 plus because it literally is brutal and it doesn't cover it up. And you've got people. And the thing is, quite often in these dramas, like in a Western or a war film, you have character when say showing a picture of their girlfriend and you go, oh no, that's it. They've had it. Because it's always a bit of a cliche. Or I like my favourite programme, Walking Dead. I love The Walking Dead. And you have a character that seems to suddenly do something out of character. And you think, oh dear, he's had it. But you don't get that in this. You don't know who's going to die. And you don't know who's going to live. Most people will survive. There's not going to be everyone going to die in this. But you just don't know. But it must have been hell on earth in those tanks. Just awful. I couldn't go through that hole. And the smell and the cold and the warmth, I don't know. I have no idea what it was like. It must have been. But I think this book really you get to the feeling of what these people did. Just staggering. Like I say, stretcher bear, all the various, and also like you got like the priests, doing the work behind the scenes, just so to help the people don't see the after effects. Of course, when people would have been, it's like a shell or something would go through a tank. And it describes it so well, and you can actually see in here the after effects and description of it, and you think, oh my God, that would be truly awful. It just doesn't even. It's a cooker. It's a cooker. Anything you imagine it's just something going in there, sort of a grenade or whatever. In a film, you see it and you go, oh yeah, terrible. You just, oh yeah, bang, oh yeah. But comic books actually can go in there and actually capture that moment, those scenes, and you just go, oh, awful. Just and the shooting and things, everything about this, and you see and people on the tracks. You got people in here on the thing. It's just, but the artwork is just absolutely glorious. But at the same time, utterly, relentlessly horrible, utter devastation, and it's and the relationships between the people when people are angry with it. You imagine the tensions that must get. You're in a pressure cooker, you're in a tank, and they've got that sort of thing. Suddenly, someone says something, someone triggers just human emotion that just comes through, and this captures it. And of course, that can be captured in film and things in many ways, but just the way the panels turn. And so you've got a scene where it's like this, and then that, and backwards and forwards. Sometimes not so easily done in a film. It's like more artificial. And you've got the various people taking the bodies, the padre there, and the Germans, and again you see the character of the people. Sometimes quite a lot of certainly American films, English films, sometimes you don't, and that's why I quite like enjoying watching films of the war, because you can see it from the other side, see their what they were obsessed about, that obsession, fanaticism, whatever, this sort of thing. Now, I don't know. Maybe some were, some weren't, they weren't. Some couldn't wait to get back home. I'm certain, all those sort of things. And that comes with Welcome to the Fatherland. And you've got that all the way through this sort of, what would you do in these situations? The person, yourself, what would you do? And this character really, and seeing the mangled tanks, and some of them, must have been horrific. Say you're in a relatively small tank. They look enormous to me. Our ones, you go along and been to various museums and things, you see it, you stand beside some of these things. Or ones that, even the First World War, ones you see outside. There was the one in Ashford. There's this old tank. We used to have one in Maidstone, down near the river. And they're massive. But this one, you see the German one. And the names of all the things like the tiger and the panthers and things, and you look at it and it says, this is enormous. And it's just, you must just fighting it, and you just fires rockets against it. You've got this sort of scene there, and you're going, wow, imagine facing that. something that you've got a relentless enemy. You've got an enemy. But of course, it also talks about problems as well. It's not just, wow, this massive thing. But yeah, and that's sometimes quite ignored in films sometimes, I think, that you suddenly get, oh, this is impressive. But it just shows you about like the oil, where things that break down. Now, I know that is in films as well. Quite often you have the mechanics working on the thing, but you've got this sort of thing, you've got the characters sort of discussing things, because they must have happened. You must have problems with these things, mechanical parts. What happens when something gets in there, something goes wrong, or when it goes across and there's a lovely bit here with, you're going through a place you don't know what's underneath, a factory or something, and what's in there. And things suddenly are not as good. So you might have the most amazing weaponry, but it still, in the end, falls to pieces because of a simple, stupid thing. You just fall through the roof or whatever that you don't know that's there. And this book is like that. And it shows you about the people that are just awful, just absolutely awful. It's relentless. It is relentless. But what a great story. You can really feel that period. It certainly makes me want, and just the bits where Sgt Stiles, you're following this character and the relentlessness between the Germans as well. It's just really far more, what's his name, Sergeant Fury or those sort of things, the DC Sergeant Rock. I really capture that feeling of all the buildings and the structures, everything, and just sheer awfulness. And then, well, the story goes on. Oh, something behind it. We actually moved to Korea. Obviously, I don't really know vast amounts about the Korean War. A little bit, obviously, but there was clearly, obviously, lots of Brits there and many other nationalities as well. And of course, this another thing that's quite often shows lots of different peoples are involved, just in this conflict. And again, the artwork is superb, and it obviously got recaps about the Second World War, so you get a little bit of what happened, and also this, a nice sort of references to various characters as well. And also just the sheer relentlessness of the Koreans, the North Koreans. And also about it doesn't shy away about the politics as well, which is something as well. But it's, you've got some great artwork, the colours and things, you've got but it's again, relentlessly brutal. The firefights and what happened just for this hill. Must have been lots of hills over there. I don't know. Whenever you see films like that, they always seem to be on hills. But I suppose you must have to have that hill. Because obviously, if you suddenly lose that hill, suddenly, how do you your troops? Because then you're I don't know, all those sort of military tactics, and it sort of discusses it to a degree. It's obviously, it really quite a lot of it goes over my head in terms of this person. And sometimes I would have loved a glossary in this. Quite often, there's a reference to and actually things like even the simple, and I'm terrible to admit it. Hello, Charlie 4, Abel. I have to say, I know these are all call signs and things, but it would have been fascinating to know a little bit about those. But it doesn't mention that. But at the same time, there's lots of things quite often that are mentioned in it that you wouldn't, unless I guess you're into this sort of thing and you've followed all these sort of things, you probably wouldn't know those references. To me, but I just found it fascinating, and I just loved every single bit. It's just relentless, and you follow the characters. It's just beautiful story and horrible at the same time. That's all you can say. It's just horrible. You come away from this with appreciation. Do you think, oh my God, that, I don't know how. You have to honour, amazed at people. And there is a bit of mention of that in the book as well. It's just something about that. And you think, anyway, what this book also does, it's got a lovely afterword as well. And I love things. It goes a lot about the background of the story as well. Obviously, all the Tiger crews, about the area. It's got quite a bit of information about the Canadian units, American forces, German tanks, and so on and so on. All a variety of things. And also about detail about the green fields beyond. Hill 235. Fascinating. I'm really glad they put that in. That actually makes it as well, because I love the story. The story was a gem to read. Again, just brutal, absolutely brutal. You can't say any other word than that. But also, it's got a lovely bonus section at the back. And I love bonus section sketchbooks because you can see all the original artwork there and just beautiful. I love the pencil work. In fact, I quite often in books, I'd prefer it just to be in penciled. So if they brought out a book, pencil one, I would be just as happy. I love inking and colour, but pencil work, you just see the artist at work, and I just think, wow. And that's it. About the creators at the back, you've got here. And then, obviously, a little bit more about things. This is a lovely quality book, absolutely brilliant little paperback. Now, this is from, I say, Dead Reckoning, Tankies. I thoroughly enjoyed it, totally recommended. Definitely a superb book, well worth checking out.